The airlock exploded inward, metal shards slicing through the air as Jackson Thorne dove behind the nearest console. Alarms blared throughout the station. Through the swirling mist of escaping atmosphere and the howling winds of Elira 7, a figure tumbled inside, blue-skinned, covered in blood, and definitely not human. "Proximity breach. Unknown biosignature detected," screamed the station's AI. "Override! Emergency protocol!" Jackson shouted, lunging for the airlock controls. His fingers slammed the emergency close sequence as the temperature plummeted. The massive doors sealed with a pneumatic hiss, cutting off the deadly cold. The blue-skinned woman lay motionless, indigo blood pooling beneath her. Then her chest heaved. She was alive. Jackson approached cautiously, his breath clouding in the still freezing air. Without warning, golden eyes with vertical pupils snapped open. The woman moved with impossible speed, clawed hand grabbing his throat. "Narakthal," she snarled, her voice somewhere between a growl and song. "Sveth Tark Vale." "Can't breathe," Jackson gasped, tapping her wrist. The golden eyes studied him, intelligence overriding instinct. She released him, collapsing back as consciousness faded. Before she hit the floor, Jackson caught her. Despite her predatory appearance, she weighed surprisingly little. 3 years alone on outpost ES-117 had prepared Jackson for many emergencies. Equipment failures, atmospheric anomalies, even the occasional meteor strike. Finding a wounded alien on his doorstep wasn't in any of the protocols. He carried her to his quarters, laying her on his sleeping pallet. The med scanner protested when he passed it over her torso. "Unknown physiology. Cannot recommend treatment," it announced. "Give me the raw data," Jackson muttered. The holographic display showed severe dehydration, hypothermia, and internal hemorrhaging. Basic triage, then. Warmth first. He activated his only thermal blanket, wrapping it around her and setting it to maximum heat. Hours passed as he monitored her vitals, watching the slow rhythm of her breathing strengthen. Eventually, exhaustion claimed him, and he fell asleep against the wall. A sensation of being watched jolted him awake. Golden eyes, now clear and alert, studied him from inches away. "You gave me your Kalara," she said in accented but recognizable English. She clutched the thermal blanket around her shoulders like a sacred object. "That was unexpected." "You speak English," Jackson managed, rubbing the back of his head. 17 languages from your world, 12 from others," she replied matter-of-factly. "I am Kari. You are?" "Jackson Thorne, technical supervisor for ES-117. He gestured around them. "This is my station." Kari sat up, the blanket slipping to reveal that her wounds were already healing, the skin knitting together with remarkable speed. "Your injuries," he started. "Are healing," she finished. "My biology is efficient." She stood with predatory grace, examining his quarters with evident curiosity. Her bodysuit seemed to shift color slightly with her movements, adapting to the room's temperature. "What are you?" Jackson asked, keeping his distance. "And how did you end up half dead at my airlock?" "I am Lunarian. We were thought extinct before your people reached the stars." She picked up a hologram of Earth landscapes. "Your world is very green." "Compared to this frozen wasteland, yes." Jackson crossed his arms. "You still haven't explained how you got here, or what you're doing on Elira 7? There aren't any settlements within 1,000 kilometers." Kari's expression hardened. "I was hunted. I escaped. The details don't concern you." "They do if whoever was hunting you decides to come looking," Jackson countered. "I'm the only person on this station. If there's a threat, I need to know." She studied him, unblinking, then nodded. "I will tell you what you need to know. But first I must rest. The healing takes energy." She looked around. "Where is your sleeping chamber?" Jackson pointed to the pallet she just vacated. "That's it. This station wasn't built for comfort." Without another word, Kari returned to the pallet, still wrapped in his thermal blanket, and closed her eyes. Jackson woke the next morning to find his quarters transformed. His personal items had been rearranged. The sleeping pallet now featured cushions from his rarely used common area. Most strikingly, the thermal blanket hung across the alcove entrance like a curtain, creating a secluded space where Kari sat cross-legged, cleaning what were unmistakably weapons. "What are you doing?" he asked, voice still rough from sleep. "Preparing our nest," she replied without looking up. It's not ideal, but it will serve until we find a more defensible location. Our nest? Jackson blinked. Yes. She gestured to the hanging blanket. You gave me your Kalara. Among my people, this is the first step in the bonding. I have accepted. Jackson stared, comprehension dawning. The blanket? That was just a blanket. You were freezing to death. Confusion flickered across her features, followed by irritation. You deny the offering? Then why give it freely? Because you were injured and suffering from hypothermia, Jackson explained carefully. It was basic human decency, not a whatever you think it was. She stood in one fluid motion, a curved blade with a shimmering inner edge now in her hand. Among Lunarians, offering one's Kalara, your blanket, is to offer protection, territory, shared warmth. It is not done lightly. I didn't know that, Jackson said, raising his hand slightly. Cultural misunderstanding. No offense intended. Kari was silent, her expression unreadable. Then she nodded once. I understand. Your species lacks the proper instincts. Before Jackson could respond to that assessment, she gathered her weapons, 3-bladed instruments and a compact energy weapon. Where did those come from? He asked. My survival pack. I retrieved it before seeking shelter here. And why do you need weapons on Lyra 7? There's nothing here except ice, rocks, and toxic atmospheric compounds. Kari secured the weapons to her bodysuit, each sliding into a specialized sheath. I told you, I was hunted. The hunter hasn't abandoned his prey simply because I found temporary shelter. Who's hunting you? Tark Vale. The name emerged as a growl, her lips pulling back to reveal teeth that seemed sharper than before. Commander of the Lunar Strike Force. He claims me as property. Slavery? Jackson asked, anger flaring. Worse. Her expression darkened. Breeding program. Lunarians are nearly extinct. Those who remain are valuable. And this Tark Vale, he followed you to Lyra 7? Not yet, but he will. She finished securing her weapons. I should leave. Your involvement will only endanger you. Where would you go? The nearest outpost is over 1,000 kilometers away, and the environment out there is lethal. I've survived worse, Kari said, but hesitation crept into her voice. Stay, Jackson found himself saying. At least until you're fully healed. We can sort out the nest misunderstanding. And if this Tark Vale shows up, 2 defenders are better than 1. Kari studied him, golden eyes penetrating. Finally, she nodded. Very well, Jackson Thorne. But understand, when Tark Vale comes, he won't show mercy to anyone who shelters me. His strike force has weapons that can reduce this station to atoms. Understood, Jackson said, wondering if he really did. 5 days later, the proximity alarm blared through the station. Jackson's fingers flew across the monitoring console. Unscheduled vessel approaching. Classification, militarized scout ship, announced the AI. Kari appeared beside him, weapons already drawn. He's found me. 1 ship, small class, heavily armed, transponder encrypted, Jackson reported. Strike team, 6 to 8 soldiers, plus Tark Vale himself, if I'm important enough. You sound like you've encountered these before. Twice. The first time I was unprepared. A grim smile crossed her face. The second time, I was waiting for them. The approaching vessel's trajectory appeared on screen. They'll dock at the main airlock in 12 minutes, Jackson said. Decision made. We need a plan. Surprise flickered across Kari's face. You would stand against Tark Vale? He shows no mercy. This is my station, Jackson said firmly, and I don't much care for slavers or breeding programs. What are our options? For the first time, Kari smiled genuinely. Perhaps there was more to your blanket offering than either of us realized, Jackson Thorne. 10 minutes of frantic preparation followed. 3 years of isolated maintenance had made Jackson intimately familiar with every system and weakness of ES-117. The atmospheric regulators in Sector 3 can be overridden, he explained as they worked. If we lure them there, I can flood the chamber with concentrated methane and trigger the emergency ventilation. They'll have environmental suits, Kari countered, checking her energy weapon. True, but the sudden pressure change will disorient them. And if we time it right with a spark from the electrical system, a trap of ice and fire, Kari finished, understanding. Clever. The proximity alarm sounded again. 5 minutes until docking. There's something else, Jackson added. The abandoned mining tunnels beneath the station. They're unstable, but they connect to the surface about 2 kilometers east. If things go wrong, an escape route, Kari nodded. Good thinking. They set traps at strategic points, tripwires from spare cabling, makeshift caltrips from broken equipment. Jackson reprogrammed maintenance drones to position the final components of their plan. Ready? Jackson asked as they took position in the central control room. No, Kari admitted, but we fight nonetheless. The main airlock's override alert sounded. Someone was forcing entry. They're early, Jackson muttered, checking the surveillance feed. 6 figures in sleek environmental suits, armed with advanced weapons, entered the station. At their center stood a 7th figure, taller than the others, his helmet adorned with serrated ridges. Tark Vale, Kari whispered, hatred and fear mixing in her voice. He came himself. Special occasion? I killed his brother during my second escape, she replied simply. Ah! Jackson swallowed hard. On screen, Tark Vale removed his helmet, revealing blue skin darker than Kari's and burning amber eyes. His massive form nearly filled the corridor. His voice boomed through the communication system. Attention human facility. We seek a fugitive, a female Lunarian who has violated breeding protocols of the Onyx Directive. Surrender her immediately and you'll be compensated. Jackson glanced at Kari, who shook her head. This is Technical Supervisor Jackson Thorne of Earth Atmospheric Conversion Station, ES-117, he responded. I'm afraid I can't help you. This is a restricted facility, and you've docked without authorization. Leave immediately. Deep, rumbling laughter answered him. Brave words, Supervisor Thorne, but futile. My sensors detect 2 life forms, 1 human, 1 Lunarian. You cannot hide her. Not hiding anything, just informing you that you're trespassing on Earth Territorial Authority property. Tark Vale gestured to his team, who spread out, weapons ready. Your Earth authorities are 15 light-years away, Supervisor, and they care little for a single technician on a forgettable ice planet. Surrender the Lunarian female, and you may live. Jackson cut the communication. They're taking the bait, heading toward Sector 3. Kari nodded, eyes fixed on the feed. Tark Vale is no fool. He'll suspect a trap. That's why we've set 3, Jackson replied, activating a sequence. Let's move to position 2. They slipped through maintenance corridors, Kari moving silently while Jackson tried to minimize his heavier footfalls. The first explosion rocked the station as they reached their secondary position. Trap 1 triggered, Jackson confirmed. 2 of their team caught in the blast. Kari's expression remained unchanged. They'll be more cautious now. On screen, the strike team regrouped, Tark Vale gesturing angrily as he issued new orders. They approached Sector 3, the heart of the main trap. Get ready, Jackson murmured, fingers poised over his terminal. When they reached the central chamber, one soldier spotted the trigger mechanism for the methane trap and alerted Tark Vale. They've seen it, Jackson cursed. Plan B. Kari was already moving, her energy weapon humming to life. Jackson activated the backup sequence. The station's lights died, emergency lighting casting everything in dim red. Simultaneously, the fire suppression system activated, filling corridors with dense foam. Through infrared surveillance, Jackson watched the strike team become disoriented. 2 moved away from the main group, directly into Kari's path. What happened next wasn't clearly visible, but the heat signatures of the 2 soldiers flared brightly, then dimmed. Kari's signature moved deeper into the station, drawing away from the main group. Jackson activated the reprogrammed maintenance drones, all 6 speeding through corridors with heat signatures adjusted to mimic human and Lunarian readings. Clever, came Tark Vale's voice directly behind him. Jackson spun, terror shooting through him. The massive Lunarian commander stood in the doorway, amber eyes gleaming in the dim light. Up close, Tark Vale was even more intimidating. Nearly 7 feet tall, his blue skin covered in ritual scarring. His environmental suit was reinforced with armor plates. But not clever enough, Tark Vale continued, holding a weapon resembling a cross between a harpoon and an energy rifle. Your heat-masking technology is impressive for such a primitive outpost, but you forgot about scent. Lunarians can smell fear, Supervisor Thorne, and you reek of it. Jackson calculated options, escape routes, anything that might give him a chance. The nearest emergency exit was 10 steps behind him, but Tark Vel would cut him down before he made it halfway. "She won't come back for you," Tark Vel said conversationally, stepping into the room. "Kayari is a survivor, has been since we found her half dead in her family's ship ruins. 13 years old by your standards, already vicious enough to kill two of my best trackers." A smile spread across his face, revealing razor-sharp teeth. "That's why her genetic material is so valuable. Such resilience." "She's a person," Jackson said firmly, "not breeding stock." Tark Vel laughed, the sound rumbling through the small control room. "A person? She's a weapons supervisor, a perfect predator, the last of her specific bloodline. Do you have any idea what the Onyx Directive would pay for her offspring?" He stepped closer. "But you wouldn't understand the economics of genetic material. Your species is still squeamish about such practicalities." Jackson's hand inched toward the emergency panel behind him. One switch would activate quarantine protocol, sealing this section of the station. "I wouldn't," Tark Vel warned, his weapon humming to life. "My patience extends only so far, human. Tell me where Kari is hiding, and I might let you live." "I don't know where she is," Jackson answered truthfully. "And even if I did, I wouldn't tell you." Tark Vel's amber eyes narrowed. "Loyalty. How quaint." He raised his weapon. "Unfortunately, useless." A blur of motion dropped from the ceiling ventilation shaft above Tark Vel. Kari landed on the commander's shoulders, blade already plunging toward his neck. Tark Vel roared, dropping his weapon to grab Kari, flinging her across the room with terrible strength. She hit the wall with a sickening thud but rolled to her feet immediately, blood trickling from her mouth. "There's my prize," Tark Vel growled, ignoring Jackson. "Still fighting, even when there's no escape." Kari spat blood. "There's always escape, Tark. You taught me that." They circled each other, predators recognizing their equal. Jackson inched toward the emergency panel. "Your human pet won't survive this encounter," Tark Vel said, eyes fixed on Kari. "Even if by some miracle you kill me, my ship is programmed to obliterate this station if I don't return. Was temporary freedom worth his life? He gave me his Kalara," Kari replied, shifting her stance. "Something you wouldn't understand." Tark Vel laughed. "The blanket ritual? How primitive. Your bloodline clings to the old ways." His massive hand moved to a pouch at his belt. "But I came prepared for your sentimentality." He removed a small crystalline cube that emitted a soft, pulsing light. Kari froze. "Your mother's life crystal," Tark Vel said softly. "Removed before we processed her body for genetic material. I kept it, knowing it might prove useful." "You're lying," Kari whispered, doubt creeping into her voice. "My mother died in the ship crash." "Is that what you told yourself?" Tark Vel smiled cruelly. "She survived, Kari. Lived 3 more years in my facility. Gave us 2 viable offspring before her body failed." Rage replaced calculation in Kari's eyes. With a feral sound, she launched herself at Tark Vel, blades flashing. It was exactly what the commander wanted. He sidestepped her attack with surprising speed, catching her arm and twisting until the blade clattered to the floor. His other hand delivered a blow to her midsection that drove the air from her lungs. "Predictable," Tark Vel said, as Kari struggled in his grip. "Emotional. This is why your kind lost the resource wars." Jackson slammed his hand onto the quarantine switch. Alarms blared, and heavy shielding began descending from the ceiling. Tark Vel turned, momentarily distracted. Kari's leg came up in a vicious arc, catching the commander under his jaw with enough force to snap his head back. She twisted free, retrieving her fallen blade in one fluid motion. "Run!" she shouted to Jackson as the quarantine shields continued their slow descent. "Get to the tunnels!" Instead, Jackson dove for Tark Vel's discarded weapon, grabbing it and rolling to his feet. The rifle was heavier than it looked, designed for the commander's superior strength. Tark Vel recovered quickly, fury distorting his features as he realized he was about to be trapped. He lunged for the gap beneath the descending shield, only to be met by Kari, her blade slicing across his armored chest. The blow didn't penetrate, but drove him back. Jackson struggled with the unfamiliar weapon, finding what he hoped was the trigger. "Kari, down!" he shouted. She dropped instantly. Jackson fired, the recoil nearly dislocating his shoulder as energy surged from the weapon. It caught Tark Vale squarely in the chest, lifting the massive Lunarian off his feet and slamming him into the wall. "Go!" Jackson yelled, the quarantine shield now less than a meter from the floor. Kari rolled beneath it, Jackson following with the stolen weapon. The shield sealed with a final clang just as Tark Vale regained his footing. The commander's roar of rage was muffled by the barrier, but his mouthed words were clear. "I will find you." "We need to move," Kari said, already heading for the maintenance shaft leading to the mining tunnels. "The quarantine won't hold him long, and his team will converge on this position." Jackson nodded, following her. "The tunnels connect to the surface about 2 kilometers east. If we can reach my emergency rover—" "His ship will detect any powered vehicle," Kari interrupted. "We go on foot." "On foot? In Lyra 7's atmosphere? That's suicide without—" "Trust me," Kari said, her golden eyes intense. "I can protect you." They moved through the narrow maintenance shaft, weapons fire and shouted commands echoing behind them. At least 2 of Tark Vale's strike team had reached the quarantine shield and were attempting to override it. The entrance to the mining tunnels was concealed beneath a service panel in the station's lowest level. The tunnels had been abandoned years ago when the initial survey team determined that Lyra 7's mineral deposits weren't valuable enough to justify extraction costs in such a hostile environment. The air was stale as they entered, their path illuminated by emergency lighting strips that still function. The temperature dropped noticeably, their breath fogging. "How much farther to the surface exit?" Kari asked. "About 1.5 kilometers," Jackson replied, checking his portable terminal. "But there's a problem. The tunnel integrity is compromised in several sections. There could be collapses." A distant rumble shook the tunnel. Dust and small rocks showered from the ceiling. "What was that?" Kari asked, tensing. "Seismic activity? Or—" Jackson's eyes widened. "They're bombing the station, trying to flush us out." Another rumble, stronger this time. A crack appeared in the tunnel wall. "Run!" Kari said simply, and they did. The tunnel twisted and descended before angling upward toward the surface. The further they went, the less stable it became. Twice they navigated around partial collapses, squeezing through narrow gaps. The bombardment continued, each impact sending new tremors through the tunnel system. Jackson's portable terminal flickered with interference, but the compass function still worked, keeping them oriented toward the exit. They were within 500 meters when disaster struck. A particularly violent explosion above caused a chain reaction. The ceiling ahead groaned ominously, supports cracking. "Look out!" Jackson shouted, pulling Kari back as the tunnel collapsed. A wall of ice, rock, and twisted metal crashed down, completely blocking their path. When the dust settled, they stared at the impassable barrier. "Any other way to the surface?" Kari asked, her voice steady despite their situation. Jackson checked his terminal, heart sinking. "No, this was the only mapped exit. We'd have to go back to the station and try to reach my emergency rover." "Where Tark Vale and his remaining strike team are waiting," Kari finished grimly. "Not an option." Another explosion shook the tunnel, more debris raining down. The entire system was becoming unstable. Jackson's mind raced for alternatives. "Wait, the atmospheric processors have external vents leading to the surface. If we can reach the maintenance crawl space under Processor 3, we might follow the ventilation shaft out." "How far?" "From here? About 600 meters back toward the station, then another 400 through the crawl space." Jackson grimaced. "It's a narrow fit and hot. The processors generate a lot of heat." "Better than being buried alive," Kari remarked, already turning back. "Or becoming Tark Vale's prize." They retraced their steps through the increasingly unstable tunnel. Above them, the bombardment continued, though less frequently. Tark Vale was being strategic, trying to drive them into a trap rather than simply bury them. The junction connecting to the processor crawl space was hidden behind discarded equipment. Jackson shifted it aside, revealing a narrow hatch. "I'll go first," he said, twisting the manual override. Hot air gusted out, carrying the acrid smell of chemicals used in atmospheric conversion. "Stay close. It's easy to get disoriented in there." The crawl space was barely wide enough for Jackson to move on hands and knees. For someone of Tark Vale's size, it would be impassable, their one advantage if the commander tracked them this far. Sweat poured down Jackson's face as they crawled through the sweltering space. The processor's rhythmic thrum surrounded them, converted atmosphere flowing through massive pipes just centimeters above their heads. The terminal's display wavered in the heat, but the path to the external vent remained clear. "How much further?" Kari's strained voice came from behind. "Almost there," Jackson assured her. "Just another 100 meters." A new sound reached them, hydraulics hissing, followed by metal clanking against metal. Jackson froze. "Someone's opened the access hatch," he whispered. "They found our trail." "Keep moving," Kari urged. "I'll slow them down." Before Jackson could protest, she had pulled a blade weapon and was turning in the confined space, somehow maneuvering despite the cramped conditions. "Kari, go," she insisted. "Find the vent. I'll be right behind you." Reluctantly, Jackson continued forward, his progress hampered by exhaustion and heat. Behind him, he heard conflict, a surprised shout, then the distinctive hum of Kari's energy weapon discharging in the enclosed space. The external vent loomed ahead, a grid of metal slats through which he could see Lyra 7's steel-gray sky. Freedom was tantalizingly close, but Jackson hesitated, looking back toward the sounds of combat. 3 days. He'd known her for just 3 days, and yet the thought of abandoning her was unthinkable. With a muttered curse, Jackson reversed direction, awkwardly turning to head back. The energy rifle bumped against the pipes, making progress even more difficult. The scene he encountered was chaotic. 2 of the strike team had entered the crawl space, their sleek armor making them appear almost mechanical in the dim emergency lighting. Kari was holding them off with incredible efficiency, using the confined space to her advantage. One soldier was already down, his helmet visor shattered, while the second struggled to bring his weapon to bear, as Kari's blade slashed at the vulnerable joint between shoulder and neck. But a third soldier was entering, and Jackson could see more armored figures in the tunnel beyond. He brought up the energy rifle, bracing it against his shoulder. The weapon hummed to life, power building as he aimed at the third soldier. "Kari, down!" he shouted. She flattened herself against the floor without hesitation. The soldier she'd been fighting momentarily confused. Jackson fired, the blast surging over Kari to catch the second soldier in the chest. The impact slammed him backward into the third, sending both tumbling back into the tunnel. The confined space amplified the discharge, the heat searing Jackson's exposed skin. Warning lights flashed on the processor pipes. The energy discharge had disrupted something in the system. Kari was already moving, finishing her opponent with a precise strike before scrambling toward Jackson. "What are you doing? I told you to find the vent." "Change of plans," Jackson gasped. The rifle's power cell depleted from that single shot. He discarded it. "We need to move. I think I just destabilized the processor's conversion cycle." The pipes above groaned, metal expanding as temperature rose dramatically. Warning klaxons sounded throughout the crawl space. They scrambled toward the external vent, the heat now almost unbearable. Jackson's vision swam, dehydration and exhaustion taking their toll. He felt Kari's hand on his back, pushing him forward when he slowed. The vent cover was secured with heavy bolts, designed to withstand Lyra 7's brutal atmospheric conditions. Jackson's fingers fumbled with the manual release, skin blistering from contact with the superheated metal. "Move!" Kari ordered, pushing him aside. With strength that belied her size, she slammed her blade into the seam where the vent cover met the frame, then twisted. Metal screamed in protest, but the cover bent outward, creating a gap. Behind them, more soldiers entered the crawl space, their progress slowed by the increasing heat in their fallen comrades' bodies. Kari wedged herself into the gap, pushing outward with her legs and back. The cover groaned, then gave way suddenly, tearing free. Frigid air rushed in, the temperature shock making Jackson gasp. "Go!" Kari urged, helping him toward the opening. The external vent emptied onto a narrow maintenance platform, just large enough for them to stand. Beyond it, Lyra 7's bleak landscape stretched to the horizon, endless fields of ice and rock under a turbulent gray sky. The wind howled around them, carrying ice particles that stung exposed skin. Jackson's environmental suit had been damaged in their escape, tears exposing his arms and neck to the deadly cold. Already he could feel the burning sensation as his sweat froze against his skin. Kari assessed their situation quickly. "The station is 2 kilometers west, Tark Vale's ship will be monitoring the perimeter. And the cold will kill me in minutes without proper protection, Jackson finished grimly. Not the escape we hoped for. To his surprise, Kari began removing her bodysuit's outer layer. Put this on, she ordered, handing him the garment. When he hesitated, she added, My biology can adapt to the cold. Yours cannot. Take it. The material was surprisingly warm, designed to reflect body heat back to the wearer. As Jackson put it on over his damaged suit, he saw fur begin to emerge across Kari's exposed skin, a dense covering that shifted from blue to silver as it adapted to the environment. Impressive, he remarked. A ghost of a smile crossed her features. A useful adaptation. Now we need to... The processor behind them exploded. The blast threw them from the platform. Jackson felt weightless before hitting the icy ground hard, breath driven from his lungs. Pain lanced through his left side, a broken rib, possibly worse. Through watering eyes, he saw the atmospheric processor engulfed in flames, black smoke billowing into the gray sky. The explosion would be visible for kilometers, a beacon announcing their location to Tark Vale. He struggled to his feet, searching for Kari. She had landed farther away and for a moment wasn't moving. Then she stirred, pushing herself up with visible effort. A gash across her forehead leaked indigo blood that froze almost instantly in the bitter cold. Jackson stumbled toward her, each breath sending fresh pain through his injured side. Can you walk? He asked, helping her to her feet. Yes, she replied, though her golden eyes were unfocused. But we have nowhere to go. He followed her gaze across the barren landscape. She was right. There was no shelter, no hiding place, nowhere to run that Tark Vale's sensors wouldn't find them. The familiar hum of engines reached them, growing louder. A sleek craft appeared in the distance, approaching rapidly from the direction of the station, the commander's personal transport. He's coming for us himself, Kari said quietly, always the hunter. Jackson looked around desperately, seeking any advantage, any strategy. His gaze fell on the burning processor, then moved to the two remaining processors visible in the distance. The processors, he said suddenly, they're interconnected. If the fire reaches the chemical feed lines, understanding dawned in Kari's eyes. Chain reaction, the entire processing facility would explode, taking Tark Vale's ship with it if he's close enough. Jackson winced as another wave of pain shot through his side. But we'd need to trigger it manually. The safety protocols would contain the initial explosion otherwise. Kari's expression hardened. Then we trigger it manually. You know what that means, Jackson said softly. We wouldn't get clear in time. She looked at him, golden eyes meeting his. There are worse fates than death, Jackson Thorne. Tark Vale taught me that. The approaching craft was close enough now to make out details, sleeker than the strike team's ship, its hull adorned with what appeared to be trophies. Hunting trophies, Jackson realized with a chill. I can get us back inside, he said, decision made. Through the emergency access on Processor 2. If we reach the central control hub, I can override the containment protocols. Kari nodded once, then did something unexpected. She reached out and touched his face, her clawed fingers surprisingly gentle against his cold skin. You gave me your Kalara, she said simply. Now I give you my life. They turned and began moving toward the second processor, each step sending lances of pain through Jackson's broken rib. The wind howled around them, ice particles scouring exposed skin. In the distance, Tark Vale's craft began a slow, circling pattern, like a predator assessing its prey before the final strike. They reached Processor 2 as the craft began to descend. The emergency access was located near the massive structure's base, partially protected from the wind. Jackson pressed his palm against the biometric scanner, praying the system was still online despite the damage to the facility. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then with a hydraulic hiss, the access panel slid open, revealing a narrow maintenance ladder leading up into the processor's interior. Go, Jackson urged, glancing back at the descending craft. I'll be right behind you. Kari hesitated, studying his face as if memorizing it. Then she nodded and began climbing. Jackson followed, each movement sending fresh agony through his injured side. Above them, the processor hummed with power, converting Alira 7's toxic atmosphere into something that, someday, humans might breathe without assistance. The central control hub was located 50 meters up, a transparent bubble protruding from the processor's main structure, offering a 360-degree view of the facility and landscape beyond. From here, technicians could monitor all three processors and atmospheric conditions across the region. As they emerged into the hub, Jackson saw Tark Vale's craft landing near the burning ruins of Processor 1. The commander himself emerged, his massive form unmistakable even at a distance. He paused, looking around, then turned directly toward their position, as if sensing their presence. "He knows we're here," Kari said quietly. "He always knows." Jackson moved to the central console, fingers flying across the interface. The system responded sluggishly, damaged by the explosion of Processor 1. "The containment protocols are still active," he reported, scanning readouts. "But I can override them. It'll take a few minutes." "We don't have a few minutes," Kari replied, her gaze fixed on Tark Vale, now moving purposefully toward Processor 2. A weapon similar to the one Jackson had used earlier held ready. Jackson worked frantically, bypassing security measures and disabling failsafes. On a normal day, such actions would have triggered immediate alerts to Earth Territorial Authority, but with the communication array damaged in the initial attack, no one would know what happened until the quarterly supply ship arrived. Long after they were gone. "Almost there," he muttered, overriding the final containment protocol. "Once I initiate the sequence, we'll have 3 minutes before the chemical feed lines rupture. The chain reaction will be spectacular." Kari moved to stand beside him, her hand finding his on the console. 3 minutes isn't enough time to escape." "I know," Jackson said simply, "but it's enough time to end this." Her golden eyes held his for a long moment. Then surprisingly, she smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her fierce features into something almost vulnerable. "In another life," she began, but Jackson shook his head. "In this one," he said firmly. "No regrets, Kari." A crash from below interrupted them. Tark Vale had reached the emergency access and was forcing his way inside. His roar of rage echoed up the maintenance shaft, a sound of primal fury that made Jackson's blood run cold. "Initiate the sequence," Kari urged. "I'll hold him off." "No," Jackson said, making a different decision. "We face him together." He entered the final command sequence, confirming when the system asked for verification. Red warning lights flashed throughout the control hub, and a mechanical voice announced, "Warning! Critical system failure imminent. Evacuate immediately. 3 minutes to containment breach." Tark Vale emerged into the control hub just as the announcement finished, his massive form filling the access hatch. His armor was scorched from the explosion of Processor 1, but his amber eyes burned with undiminished fury. "Predictable," he growled, raising his weapon. "Cornered prey always turns desperate." "Not desperate," Kari replied calmly. "Resolved." Tark Vale's eyes narrowed as the warning announcement repeated. Understanding dawned, followed by something like respect. "Suicide, Kari? I didn't think you had it in you." His gaze shifted to Jackson. "Or perhaps your human pet has given you ideas about noble sacrifices." 2 minutes to containment breach," the system announced. Tark Vale assessed them, then the situation, his tactical mind working quickly. "An interesting gambit, but futile." He lowered his weapon slightly. "My ship can outrun the explosion radius, and you've only ensured your own destruction. The Onyx Directive will find other Lunarians." "Maybe," Jackson said, strangely calm now that death was certain. "But they'll have to do it without you." With startling speed, he lunged for the commander's weapon, knowing he had no chance of overpowering Tark Vale, but hoping to create an opening for Kari. The massive Lunarian swatted him aside effortlessly, sending him crashing into the control console. Pain exploded through Jackson's already injured side, vision going gray at the edges. Through a haze of agony, he saw Kari attack, her movements a blur as she engaged Tark Vale. They were evenly matched in speed, but the commander's superior size and strength gave him a devastating advantage. 1 minute to containment breach, the system announced. Tark Vale caught Kari's arm as she attacked, using her momentum to slam her against the transparent wall of the control hub. The impact should have incapacitated her, but she rolled to her feet, bleeding but unbowed. "I've enjoyed our hunt, Kari," Tark Vale said, circling her. "But it ends now. Come with me, and I might still spare your human." Liar, she spat, blood trickling from her mouth. You've never shown mercy. 30 seconds to containment breach. Jackson struggled to his feet, hand pressed against his injured side. The control console behind him was sparking, damaged from his impact. An idea formed, desperate, but their only chance. As Tark Vale moved in for the kill, Jackson staggered to the console and slammed his fist down on the emergency shutdown sequence. Normally, this would halt the containment breach, but with the damage he'd done to the system, it had the opposite effect. The chemical feed lines ruptured immediately, bypassing the countdown. The explosion began at Processor 2's base, a ball of blue-white flame that consumed everything in its path. The control hub shuddered, the transparent walls cracking as the pressure wave approached. Tark Vale realized what was happening a moment too late. He turned toward the access hatch, abandoning Kari in his desperation to escape. But the explosion reached them first, the control hub shattering as the blast wave hit. Jackson felt Kari's arms around him, pulling him down, her body covering his as the world dissolved into fire and noise and pain. Then darkness. Consciousness returned in fragments. Cold, wind, pain. Jackson opened his eyes to a sky filled with swirling ash and ice particles. His body was a catalog of agony, each breath a struggle against what felt like a weight on his chest. The weight moved. "Kayari," he croaked, barely audible. She stirred, her body still covering his protectively. Somehow, impossibly, they were alive. The landscape around them was transformed. Where Processor 2 had stood was now a massive crater, permafrost exposed in jagged layers. Debris scattered for hundreds of meters in all directions. Of Processor 3, only the base remained, its upper sections sheared away by the explosion. "How?" Jackson managed as Kari lifted herself off him carefully. Her body was a map of injuries, burns, cuts, bruises darkening her blue skin to near black in places. One arm hung at an unnatural angle, clearly broken. Yet her golden eyes were clear and focused as she scanned their surroundings. "The explosion," she explained, her voice rough with pain. "It blew out the control hub before the worst of the chemical reaction reached us. We were thrown clear." A grimace that might have been a smile crossed her face. "Lucky." "Tark Vale?" Jackson asked, trying to sit up. The movement sent fresh agony through his body, and he realized his injuries were far worse than he'd initially assessed. At least 3 ribs broken, possibly internal bleeding. Without medical attention? "Gone," Kari replied, her gaze fixed on a point in the distance where black smoke rose from twisted remains of what had been the commander's ship. The blast caught him as he tried to reach his vessel. Relief washed through Jackson, followed immediately by the cold realization of their situation. They were stranded on Lyra 7's surface, both severely injured, the station destroyed, no means of communication with Earth territorial authority. "The supply ship," he said, thinking aloud. "It's due in 27 days. If we can survive until then..." Kari's expression was unreadable as she looked back at him. "You are injured, badly." "So are you," he countered, reaching out to touch her broken arm. She didn't flinch. "I will heal. My body is designed for survival, for regeneration. Yours is not." The truth of her words hung between them. Without proper medical attention, Jackson's chances of surviving 27 days were slim. "There is a way," Kari said, her voice lowering, "if you would accept it." "What way?" Jackson asked, hope flaring despite rationality telling him there were no options. Kari hesitated, then said, "Among my people, there is a bonding, deeper than the Clara ritual, a sharing of life force. It allows both parties to draw on each other's strength, to heal faster than they could alone." "A biological connection?" Jackson asked, scientific curiosity momentarily overriding his pain. "Something like that," she agreed. "But it is permanent, Jackson Thorne. Once done, it cannot be undone. Our lives would be linked." "Why would you offer this?" he asked. "You barely know me." Kari's golden eyes held his. "You gave me your Kalara without understanding what it meant. You stood against Tark Vale when you could have surrendered me. You were ready to die rather than let me face him alone." Her uninjured hand found his. "I know enough." The wind howled around them, carrying ice crystals that caught the faint light from Lyra 7's distant sun. In the ruins of the processing facility, something exploded. A secondary detonation that sent a plume of dark smoke into the already darkening sky. "Yes," Jackson said simply. "I accept." Kari's expression softened, relief evident. She leaned forward, her forehead touching his in what he somehow knew was a gesture of profound intimacy among her people. "Then we begin," she whispered. "Nareth Kavala Sumari, my life to yours, yours to mine." What followed was unlike anything Jackson had experienced. Kari's clawed fingers gently traced patterns across his chest, directly above his broken ribs. As she did, she began to sing, a low melodic sound that seemed to resonate inside his very bones. Heat spread from her touch, not the searing pain of his injuries, but a warm, pulsing sensation that flowed through his body. With it came awareness of Kari's own pain, her broken arm and burned skin, the deep exhaustion threatening to overwhelm her. Somehow he understood what to do. He placed his hand over her broken arm, concentrating on the warmth connecting them. The song changed, becoming something they both contributed to, though Jackson didn't understand the words his own mouth was forming. Between them, a balance formed. His pain lessened as some of Kari's strength flowed into him. Her injuries began to heal as his more robust human immune system augmented hers. When it finally ebbed, Jackson found he could breathe without pain. His broken ribs still ached, but distantly, as if the injury had aged weeks in moments. Kari straightened, her golden eyes brighter than before. Her broken arm still hung awkwardly, but he could see the bone realigning beneath her skin. Healing accelerated beyond anything naturally possible. "It is done," she said softly. "We are bonded." Jackson reached for her hand, feeling the connection between them. Not telepathic, but an awareness that transcended physical proximity. "What happens now?" he asked. Kari looked across the devastated landscape, toward where the third processor still partially stood. "Now we survive. 27 days until the supply ship arrives. We find shelter, salvage what we can from the ruins. We heal. Together." The wind had died down, the constant howl reduced to an intermittent moan. In the distance, beyond the smoke and debris, Jackson could see the steel-gray sky beginning to clear, patches of dark purple appearing, Illyra 7's version of a sunset. "Together," he agreed, struggling to his feet with Kari's assistance. "Let's find shelter before night falls." They moved slowly through the wreckage, leaning on each other, the newly formed bond strengthening with each step. Around them, the barren landscape of Illyra 7 stretched to the horizon, harsh and unforgiving. But for the first time since arriving on this frozen planet 3 years ago, Jackson didn't feel alone. And for the first time since escaping Tark Vale's facility, Kari didn't feel hunted. "This is not a blanket, Jackson," she said, touching his forehead in what he now understood was a gesture of profound affection. "This is an oath that warms the heart more than fire." He smiled, understanding now what she meant. "No regrets, Kari." "No regrets," she agreed, her golden eyes reflecting the first stars appearing in Illyra 7's clearing sky. Together they walked toward the future, uncertain, dangerous, but theirs to face as one.